Hey everyone, Luke here. Now, I know what some of you are going to be thinking. It's like, what the hell's happened? Where's the review this week? Well, that's the thing. Shonen Jump was apparently on break this week. I don't know why, but that's something we've just got to deal with. But that doesn't mean we can't do a video on a certain series in Weekly Shonen Jump because we still have some unfinished business. That's right, guys. We are here to talk about the next 3 episodes of Dr. Stone. And again, the reason why I've chose to do it like sort of like a 3 episode batch is because Dr. Stone is the best of the 3 adaptations this year, with Promise Neverland, We Never Learn, and finally we get the best of them all, Dr. Stone, because really there's not really anything wrong with the anime adaptation. I'm personally enjoying what they're doing so far. They're not cutting anything out. They're not leaving stuff out. They're just sort of like changing it around to sort of like fit the actual episode itself and see if this actually makes much more sense than what it did in the manga. But for now, let's just get right into talking about what are those differences. Alright, so these 3 episodes cover basically Volume 2 of the manga, which we've got right here. And by the way, I got Volume 6 the other day. I don't know why I pointed to the wall, but anyway, I got Volume 6 the other day, so I'm really excited. Hopefully I've got everything now set in place for the rest of hopefully the first season of the anime, because if Dr. Stone does so well, then we might get a season 2 and might get another 24 episodes, and then we probably can get through the whole of Stone War in season 2 if it actually does come out. But for now, we're not talking about season 2, we're talking about episodes 4, 5, and 6 cover Volume 2 of the manga right here. Now, the first thing I want to talk about, the first thing that I noticed that was different from the manga is the fact that if you actually look at Yuzharia, particularly right here in the first panel, she does not have a distinctive mark on her like her arm, like right here. No, it's her right arm, so it's her right arm, so it's like this arm right here. Whereas in the actual episode itself, and also on her neck, whereas actually in the episode itself, they actually gave her a swirling pattern on her neck and on her right arm. Now, I don't know whether this was actually them, they drew this onto her somehow, or if it was like just a crack that was from when she was from the depetrification, but I can't. But yeah, even the volume cover itself, it doesn't show Yuzharia with that particular mark on her neck or on her right arm. Now I know on the volume itself it doesn't actually show her right arm, but I'm guessing that they're just sort of added that in just to give her like a bit more of distinction features in the same way that Senku and Taiju have in the actual series itself. And another thing that they actually cut out is, if I can get to it, guys, is where we have Taiju. After the whole bath scene, we actually have Taiju right here, explaining to Yuzharia what has actually been going on with him going, anyway, here's what happened, Yuzharia. Thousands of years after everyone turned to stone, Synchro and I came back to life, only us though. And the first person we brought back was the strongest primate high school, Tsukasa Shishiso, but then Tsukasa started smashing people, which is basically killing him. That's why we've got to fight him now and put a stop to him. Now, I'm pretty sure the reason why they actually just cut that out is not only just for time, but also it probably felt them like, well, we could probably have it where they've actually explained it off screen to Yuzharia without actually having to go back over again and again and again and recapping the plot up to this point. So they probably felt like it was like a bit of a deterrent factor for what they actually wanted to do in the episode, and that's the best they could actually come up with. Then the next 2 points that I want to talk about is a very interesting point right here, because what is Senku's catchphrase? Like, what is his main catchphrase that he says all the time whenever he gets excited or a new scientific experiment goes his way? Obviously, he says this this excitement really boils my blood. But what's his percentage catchphrase? It's 10 million%. Well, early on in like Volume 2, there's actually a difference here that I actually discovered, which I actually want to talk about. It's right here. Right there where it says 100 billion points for you. Now, obviously, this is not a major deal in the grand scheme of things because Leia already does go back to saying the 10 billion thing. But when I was actually reading this the first time, I was like, wait a minute. I thought his catchphrase was supposed to be 10 billion%, not 100 billion%. But again, that's just a tiny tangent, which this series is actually known for. So obviously, I'm going to go off on those tangents and talk about those things that actually just stick out. They just stick out like a sore thumb, like those little bits that you can actually find out and be like, wait a minute. Wait a minute. His catchphrase is 10 billion%, not 100 billion%. And for the manga to get it wrong, but for the anime to get it right, that's like, wow, the anime did something right. But anyway, another thing that I actually want to talk about as well is if I can find it, here it is. It's like right after when they have. When they've actually done the explosion, they're actually trying to figure out a way of actually to stop Tsukasa. We don't get the little animation right here with all of them ganging up on Tsukasa and saying, but what if we had him on the ropes ready to make a deal? Having gunpowder outside might actually be a better bargaining position. And Yuzharia going, say no to smashing it. Now, I get why they didn't include that. And the same reason why they didn't include some of Tsukasa's like much more comedic faces. I feel like they're trying to make Tsukasa to seem as threatening as possible, to see like, okay, this guy is a viable threat, even though he's proven it before and he's gonna prove it later on in the episodes. To actually, I feel like they actually felt like in the manga that kind of like took away a little bit from Tsukasa's threatening nature, and this is actually no different, because to see a chibi Tsukasa, that is just something like, no, there were some things you do not do. You cannot make Tsukasa cute and threatening at the same time. It's just not gonna happen, and I'm really glad. And one of the positives I'll give the anime is I'm really glad that they didn't include this, because again, it would probably take away a bit of Tsukasa's threatening nature in the anime if they actually had that little chibi him just like surrendering up against the wall. It's always sometimes it's good to just like keep the momentum going and be like, okay, this guy. He's a threat, and we have to keep him being a threat. Because he's the only threat we have at the moment. I mean, yes. Slight spoiler. Later on, there are other main antagonists that appear in the series after Tsukasa. But for now, Tsukasa is the main antagonist, and it would just be. It's not only weird. It would just be like it would be like seeing a chibi Aizen up against the wall like that. It would just be weird. It would just be weird. Same thing here. Looking back on it, it just feel a little bit weird that that was actually. I mean, I get what they were doing. They were trying to like get a much more. They were trying to like get the kids like enraptured. Like, oh, look at the chibi little figures of these characters. But no, there are some characters you just cannot make chibi and cute. And Tsukasa is one of them. Now, one thing I did put down in the actual notes, which is the difference between the Promised Neverland and Dr. Stone, is the fact that yes, Dr. Stone added more little bits, but at the same time that didn't deteriorate from what was actually in the manga. They actually had everything that was in the manga, but they just added those little bits on to actually just give it a bit more sprinkle and polish that wasn't actually included in the manga itself. And the best thing about it is that it did not drag, and it did not take away from the actual moments that were in the episode. They were actually relevant to the moment in hand. It was just like saying like, okay, we're gonna add this little bit, but then we're gonna just put this little extra bit on top of it. And so something like that, or just adding like one or two lines to the actual situation, whilst also not deteriorating from the situation itself. Whereas in the Promised Neverland, the reason why I was so gung-ho about just the added anime filler scenes is because it seemed to take away from aspects of the manga that could have been included. Like, for example, when last night I was talking to the the guys on Control Chaos, and I mentioned this point of like, what was the point of like taking out Isabella, revealing her number at the end of episode 2 in favour of a filler scene with Ray. That's the kind of filler that I do not like. Whereas if it's filler, that's just adding to the situation at the time, while it's also including the actual situation itself, then I'm all right with. I don't have major problems with that. Yes, you could argue that it's probably just being added just to pad out the episode, but again, the points of these videos is not to like discuss like whether the padding out is a good thing. It's just to, like, say like, okay, what are the differences, and do they actually work? In this case, they do work because they're not taking away anything that's in the manga. They're just expanding on things that were in the manga. Now, of course, the episode was not perfect. Episode 4 was not perfect. There were a few little things that I kind of disagreed with. Well, maybe just one minor thing, and this was one of them. The fact that when we have the moment with Kukaku. Right here, when she's just in silhouette and she's giving up that smoke screen. In the anime, she's not in full silhouette. You can actually see like what her color palette is and what is actually on her back. I mean, even though it's very clear here what is exactly on her back, in the anime they just make it a bit more clear, and I did not like that, because again it took away a little bit from the reveal of when we actually do get to see Kukaku in all her glory that happens at the end of episode 6 in this context. So again, like I was saying, it's just those little bits that just like irk me, but not as much as it did in the Promised Neverland, because it's a minor complaint, but still a complaint nonetheless. The fact that they could have easily kept in Kukaku in silhouette in this pose, which is something that actually I don't believe it does happen later on. I'll have to get into that when I get into it. But for now, yeah, I didn't like the fact that they actually pretty much revealed Kukaku in this moment, rather than just keeping her in silhouette and keeping that mystery building up just that little bit tiny more. But again, I think they just did that because she appears just in this like little cameo in episode 4, and then we don't see her again until episode 6. So again, I don't know if that was their intention, but it still just bugged me nonetheless. Okay, about 3 more things that I want to talk about before we actually move on to episode 5. Is the fact that Tsukasa throws away Yuzharia later. He throws her away basically after the flashback not after the flashback, after we see Kukaku in silhouette. He throws away at that point. Again, showing just how serious that again, the anime showing just how serious a threat Tsukasa is, because before I felt like it was just like. Again, I don't know whether they just kept him in there just to like keep his threat levels up, or they felt like I don't know, guys. I don't know. Maybe I'm just I'm probably just nitpicking at that point. But anyway, moving on. At this point, we get Taiju. This whole thing is actually cut until after we get the flashback with Senku when he's actually in high school. That part here doesn't come until the end of episode 5, and I'm really glad because it didn't take away, because that's all you really need there. Senku's eyes just before we go into the flashback, and I feel like that's the reason why they actually cut that moment, because it was just like this was Senku's moment, so it gave more appropriation for going into his flashback. Also, speaking of which, I actually want to talk about it. I actually want to talk about something. It's funny how a lot of people like say the end of the prologue actually shifts the focus of protagonist from Taiju to Senku, whereas it doesn't really. Really, because pretty much from when from when Tsukasa is actually brought back to life, and they're actually on that beach, and they're actually talking to each other. That's the point when you have to actually have to sit down and think like, oh, okay, Senku is the main character here, because they're actually establishing like their different ideologies and what they're actually gonna be going up against, Tsukasa and Senku respectively, and they're actually gonna be like the main like protagonist and antagonist of this story at this point. So again, a lot of people say that Senku basically became the main character at the end of the prologue, but no, I think looking back and looking through all of like the points here and actually watching the episodes, it's very much made apparent that Senku, from the beginning, like I brought this up like with the little caption at the bottom of each of the chapters on the manga scans, where it shows like the picture of who's supposed to be the main character and Senku's there at the beginning of chapter 1. But no, in chapter 3, it's very much like not chapter 3. It's chapter 3 when I believe chapter 3 is that chapter where when Tsukasa's on the beach. Like it's either chapter 3 or chapter 4. One of those two chapters when they're on that beach and Tsukasa's like, do you believe that we really should bring everyone back, Senku, even the corrupt adults? I believe that was the moment where they were actually saying, forget about Taiju being that Senku is supposed to be the main character, and looking back on these episodes, particularly this episode 4 in particular, that's I think that's got people like much more relaxed about, okay, yeah, Senku is the main character here. Now, the one thing that's come out of Senku's flashback is this part right here where he's in the hallway talking to Byakuya, and he's like, I don't even know the first thing about science, but you've got to start from square one. And Byakuya's thinking, sure, doesn't act like a little kid. That's my son for you. I really think that they really could have included that because again, that's just like the basis of Senku's character. Like he's not a normal kid. He doesn't think like a normal kid, because a normal kid at his age will probably be out just playing with his friends, just going out making their own games. But with Senku, his overarching game is like, I want to create new science, even though I have absolutely no idea where to start. I've got to start from somewhere, and I just really like that moment with Byakuya, because it just shows a tender moment of him like, oh my god, my son's not a normal kid, but if that's what he wants, I'm gonna give it to him. And again, I really wish that they had just kept that in. But that's again just a minor nitpick on my part. And that's the end of episode 4. So now we're gonna move on to episode 5, which actually did really well. There was only 3 notes here that I actually picked up on, and again, they're just minor in the grand scheme of things. Now, the major thing I want to talk about is that we don't get the flashback before the explosion, and the thing I'm talking about is this part right here with all 3 of them, with Taiju, Yuzharia, and Senku, where they're going, Plan B. We all fight to stop. To put a stop to that murderer Tsukasa. Of course we can stand a fight. I'm still not sure what's happening, but I'll do whatever I can. Again, I really wish that they kept that in, because it shows just how much of an impact Senku has on everyone and what makes him such a great protagonist, how he's able to just bring everyone together through his scientific means and actually prove to them like he is capable of leading this group. And even though he's not the most athletically, he basically lacks any athletic skills, he's still a great strategist and a great leader and a great tactician in those parts. And the fact that even Yuzharia, who has no idea what is happening, she's still willing to follow their plan, because she knows in her mind, like, okay, Senku is the smart one here. He knows what he's doing, and if anyone can get us out of this jam and get us away from a murderer, it's him. And I really wish that they'd actually include that moment here. But one thing that actually did make it so that I didn't miss this part is just the music as well. It's the music that's in the trailer, when after Taiju breaks out and he's like, I'm free, I'm finally free. I'll help. I'll work with you, Senku. You be the brains, I be. But it's just like that whimsical music that I really want to find out the track for that, because I want to listen to that track again. And it's played during the moment when Senku actually does come back to life after he's killed by Tsukasa. But yeah, that's just an amazing track, and it distracted from the fact that this moment wasn't in. But again, I really wish they would have included, just to demonstrate just how much of an impact Senku has on everyone around him, even though his plans may be absolutely ridiculous and out of the norm sometimes. times. Now, going back to what I just said about these episodes basically cementing in that Senku is the main character before the actual end of the prologue, I feel like, again, one moment here is I don't know whether this is... No, this is the end of the prologue, and this is part 1, Stone World. But the one thing that that actually cements in, hands down, Senku is the main character, is this right here, the narration where we have, which reads, this story actually starts with Senku awakening. Let's turn back the clock to where it all began. Several millennia has passed since humanity was petrified, but one day, one man named Senku suddenly awoke. Now, again, I feel like the reason that they didn't include that was because it was kind of pointless. We were already established what was actually going on, and it just seemed to be repeating it again and again and again and again and again. And I felt like I feel like why they didn't include that was just because, well, what's the point? We already know what's going on. We already know at this point who the main character is supposed to be. But I really like those narration parts because it just gives a sense of grandeur to the whole story itself. But again, like I said, just a minor nitpick, and the last one here is when Senku says, when he says, here it is, here it is when it goes, all he's got is good old diligence and ingenuity. In the episode itself, it actually says improvise rather than ingenuity, and I feel like ingenuity is a lot more inclined with Senku's character, because even though yes, technically he is improvising because of his massive amount of brain power, he's using its ingenuity and he knows exactly what he's doing and how he can get out of a situation. He's not improvising in the traditional sense. He's actually thinking like, okay, what do I need? This is not, I know exactly the components here. So again, I feel like improvise just doesn't get the same meaning across as ingenuity, which is more inclined for what Senku would actually say. So now moving on to episode 6. Now the first thing I want to talk about is that when Senku is actually building the treehouse, he slams something down and the monkeys actually just run off. Whereas in the manga, he has that monkey actually there, and I feel like he's actually more speaking to the... Yeah, it says right here, behold every little boy's dream, the mighty treehouse. So now food, clothes and shelter are all taken care of. And I feel like he's actually saying that more to the monkey to like actually boost his egotism, saying that, yes, I built this all by myself using sticks and stones. What are you going to do? Whereas in the episode itself, the monkeys have actually run off, and I just feel like that's actually just a funny moment that they actually just skipped over, where Senku is so egotistical that he will actually say this to a monkey because they're the only things that are actually fascinated by him at this moment, and he's just being like, yes, monkeys, I did this through all sticks and stones. What about that? When of course he knows very well that these monkeys cannot talk to him, but he's got no one else to talk to, so he's basically just saying this to like just boost his ego and boost his confidence up a little bit. And I find that really fascinating and really hilarious about Senku's character itself, in the fact that even if it's just like a monkey itself, he'll still say it out loud to them just so that he has someone to say it to. But again, another thing that's actually cool is but this is all made up for in a moment when that was actually not in the manga. I'm sorry about my stuttering right there, but it's where is it? It's when Senku first goes into the cave. All right, in the manga itself, he actually just comes to the conclusion himself that it's in the cave, where he goes, so the key to my revival must have been a unique external factor, and then he just looks over to the cave. Whereas in the anime itself, there's a bat that flies out of the cave, and that actually gives him a big clue of where to go. So again, I really wish that I'm really glad that they included that, because it shows that despite everything, Senku is not a genius in anything, and he still gets stuck at times, and the fact that even he needs some help sometimes, and he knows that he needs help, but the fact that he needs help in even a scientific and a thinking way, I feel like that was a really good choice that they actually just include that back, just to give him that tiny little bit of clues to actually look over at that cave. Now, one other change that I sort of agree of is the fact that during the montage, when Senku's actually trying to figure out the revival formula, we actually get the thoughts right, the thoughts that he has right here, rather than him sitting down and saying all of these thoughts. We actually have him like just spread out throughout all the various bits of the montage and actually saying it there. And again, I love that about it because it gives more of an insight into Senku's mind, rather than just having it be afterwards of and shows that he's constantly thinking about everything even when he's on the move. He's just like, okay, thinking like, okay, this is not working, okay, this is not working, I've tried it everywhere, and it just gives us a fascinating look into Senku's mind and how he operates. Now, one change that actually happens is when Senku's actually figuring out like how he was able to come back to life, and how he was thinking for all that time. In the manga, it says the brain uses about 400 calories per day. Do the conversion for 3,700 years, and you'll need over 2 trillion joules. Now, in the anime itself, in the episode itself, it's actually changed to just Triliolius. Now, I don't know whether this was actually made to simplify 2 trillion Geolius, or if they actually think that that's actually what he's actually saying, because if that was the case, that is Senku would not just say Triliolius and not give out the actual number itself, because he has that much egotistical about how much he can memorize himself. So he would actually say the actual number itself, pinpoint. So I don't know whether this was actually just done to make it sound like 2 trillion Geolius without actually just saying 2 trillion Geolius. I don't know, and I'm not really sure if that's actually what their intention was in the actual episode itself. Also, another thing that I'm happy that the anime didn't include is this part right here when Senku is whacking Taiju's statue and saying, "That blockhead of yours is slowing down your revival, not enough brain activity in there." Again, what I love about this is that because we had this moment earlier in the episode itself, they felt like, okay, if Senku does do this way too much, he's going to break the statue before Taiju is even brought back to life. And I feel like they felt like this was just unnecessary cruelty to Taiju himself. So again, that's one positive. That's one thing I am fine with them completely moving out of the episode. And again, it shows that again, by not including it, but like still having Senku encouraging Taiju to like, come on, be revived, shows how much trust Senku actually has in Taiju. Even though he's a blockhead and a moron, he still values him as a friend and still needs him for his strength and stamina, because that's something he does not have at this moment. But he's known Taiju for the longest, so he knows what he's capable of and actually needs him to survive in this world, to do the things that he can't do, both physically and mentally. Now, one thing that's kept out that I'm kind of confused about is this comment by Taiju where he mentions how Yuzharia is so quick when it comes to crafting, and it's no wonder she joined the handicrafts club. Now, the reason why I bring this up is because it's viable for later on when Yuzharia becomes like sort of like the streamsus for the actual stone world, able to provide them with the clothes and the materials to actually survive the cold, harsh environment, or just like a non-engineering engineer, if that makes sense, where just actually able to create sails and create bedding and all of that. And I feel like the fact that that Taiju specifically mentions that Yuzharia is so quick at it actually gets Senku on his radar and actually keeping tabs on what she is capable of as well. And the fact that they didn't include it, it's just like, maybe it's just something that they felt like was a little bit unnecessary to actually include in, so they just left it out altogether. And it's but again, it's a line that may be insignificant at this point, but it's majorly important later on, especially in the current story arc, or like one of the previous story arcs that we actually had recently, before the actual Great Sail Voyage arc that we have right now. But again, they probably felt like, wow, it's probably not going to be relevant for until much later on, so should we cut it or shouldn't we cut it? I feel like they actually had debate on whether or not they should actually cut it out or should they just leave it in. But again, that's just my speculation at this moment in time, and I really don't know what they were actually thinking, when that actually happened. But another thing that they actually that I'm actually surprised about is the fact that this part right here was Senku and Taiju, and when they're actually having their final conversation, and how it's just like off screen. Now it's not off screen in the traditional sense where we don't actually see it. It's just more like that. You can clearly see that they're actually speaking to each other with the speech bubbles, but in the actual anime itself, it's sort of like a narration over all of that. And I don't know why they didn't just like include them just having a general conversation to each other. And that's again one of those little nitpicks. I was just like, what was the point of including that? When I first saw that, I actually thought my computer was freezing up. But no, that is actually legitimately what happens in the series. Like, they just stop talking and just staring each other down, and it's just narration. And the way you probably experienced it is like, I thought my computer screen was like just actually freezing up when that actually happened. But no, that's legitimately what happens in the episode. And I don't know how many people in Japan actually felt that, like, wait, as our TV just sort of like froze and just having the audio or something like that. Now, I can't be the only one who actually did notice that I was actually getting confused by that as well. So let me know if you were actually getting confused about that when Taiju's voiceover was just over, and you, especially after the point where Senku's actually talking out loud, and then you just see like a narration from Taiju with no movement of his voice. Let me know, guys. Just let me know if you guys were just as confused as I was when that actually happened. Now we're moving on to the final three points here. The first point that I want to talk about is this point right here, where we have Senku just walking around, and he's like, to build a kingdom of science, I've got to make an alliance with the mysterious group X that sent up those smoke signals. And again, we have like. Actually, no, when I was going back before, showing Kukaku's silhouette there, not showing Kukaku's silhouette earlier on, that kind of like ruined the moment of when she's actually revealed, especially here where we have this moment right here when she's actually in full silhouette. But anyway, I feel like they could have just included that because it's actually building up to what is essentially going to become the major players in the upcoming arcs, because we have silhouettes of Kiryu, Giru, and Chrome as well. We have silhouettes of them, and again, I feel like they really should have included them because it's just actually building up to the mystery of what they're actually going to look like. Although I guess the reason why they didn't include that and they just were like, we're going to show it off, was because they were included in the intro. So again, I don't really know if that was like what their intention was. But I was like, well, they're in the intro, so we might as well just show them in the episode rather than covering them in silhouettes. But they could have easily just had that in the intro itself, them just in like silhouette and shadowy silhouettes, because that's something that actually happens a lot in animes where you have a really important plot element that's actually in silhouette before it's actually revealed. Like case in point, Luffy's Snake Man in Superpowers and Carrot Sulong form, they were actually in silhouette until they were actually revealed in the anime episode where they debuted, and then after that you could just basically show them. So again, I don't know whether they felt like, well, we'll keep them in silhouette in the intro and then reveal them in the opening, or they just felt like, well, we've shown them in the opening, so we might as well just show them in the episode. I think that's the reason why they didn't just include the silhouettes right here of pretty much the major characters that are going to appear from now on for the rest of the series, for the rest of the first series. Now, the two last points I want to talk about is the fight between Tsukasa and Kukaku. That's actually slimmed down a lot in the anime. Like, for example, this part right here where she's just going, we don't get that. Sorry guys, I dropped the book then. We don't get, but yeah, pardon that little technical mishap there. We don't get this part right here where we get that portion of the fight. It just sort of like cuts over to it has those two parts right there, and then it just has this part right here. And again, actually no, I think that's the only part of the fight that's if I could actually just look at it. No, there's this other part right here where we have this part right here. This part is actually slimmed down quite a lot as well. But again, I understand why I feel like they actually didn't include all of the fights, because it was probably a timing issue as well, in the fact that we can show little bits of the fight but not the full extent to the fight, or we can't drag it out as long as possible because we're not technically an action series in the traditional sense, like sort of like how Bleach is. I mean, yes, we can going to include action, but that's not our main focus here. Our main focus is basically sci-fi adventure rather than sci-fi action, and I feel like that's the only reason why they didn't trim down the fight. But again, it would have been cool to actually see that, but I understand it was probably a timing issue and probably the fact that it wasn't one of the main focuses that they were actually wanting to focus on, and they got down the idea of like, okay, so there's this girl that if she goes over to Senku's side, that she can actually be a potential match for Tsukasa, and I feel like that's probably all they wanted to get across here. Okay, there's this girl that can be a match for Tsukasa, and there's going to be other characters that can just stand on him, but Senku wants to get them into his Kingdom of Science, which will be coming up within the next few episodes. Episode 7 will probably be starting. Episode 7 will be starting the Ichigami Village arc, and I'm really looking forward to that arc because it has my favourite character in it quite a lot. So I'm really looking forward to the next episode, because the next episode of 2 of these will feature my favourite character. And for those of you who know, who have watched some of the videos, you know who it is. It's Tsukaya. It's the little girl with the melon on her head, and I'm going to be talking about why she is so awesome when we get to talking about her character, and I'm really looking forward to it. But the last point I want to talk about, which is the last point of the actual episode, which is this part right here. My name is Kukaku, and I do believe I have fallen for you quite hard. Now, in the actual episode itself, she actually just says, I've taken quite a liking to you. Now that's not as funny as I have fallen for you hard, because again, you don't get like the expression of Senku's face, because that's basically what the audience were having at that point when she went like that. Like, what? And maybe they'll include that in the next episode, maybe not. We'll just have to wait and see. But anyway, guys, that was episodes 4, 5, and 6. Really good episodes, just tiny little bits that were sort of like moved around, left out for whatever reason, or just having more bits added on to actually expand on the situation, not remove bits from the situation, just to add your own stamp onto the series. You were just expanding on certain situations, and again, like I said, this adaptation is going really well. I've had pretty much no problems with it. That can change, but for now we're going to be moving on to volume 3 of the series, which has quite possibly my favorite panel, or my favorite still image from any single manga, and it's the intro for the actual for these actual videos as well. That panel with Senku and that light, that's my personal favorite panel of any manga series. When I first saw that, I was like blown away, and it's just stuck out to me as just what manga as a medium can be capable of. But anyway, guys, I will talk about that moment again when we get to it in the actual anime itself. And that'll be it. So what did you think of these episodes, and whether you thought that they were adapted really well? Comment below, like, subscribe, comment, all that jazz. And this will be Lash and Luke signing off. Later, guys.